What if you could sit down with your 80-year-old self for just 1 hour? What would they tell you? What secrets would they share? What mistakes would they warn you about, and what joys would they urge you not to miss? For the past 6 months, I've been having exactly these conversations. I've sat in living rooms, walked through gardens, and shared coffee with 15 remarkable people between the ages of 72 and 94. Each one has lived through decades of triumph and heartbreak, success and failure, love and loss. And each one has wisdom that could change your life if you're willing to listen. What struck me most wasn't their regrets, though those were profound. It was their clarity. Time has a way of burning away the trivial and revealing what truly matters. These aren't abstract philosophical insights. They're practical, hard-earned lessons from people who've walked the entire path of life and can now see it clearly from the mountaintop. Today, I'm sharing their voices with you. Some of their advice might surprise you. Some might challenge everything you think you know about success, happiness, and what makes a life well lived. But all of it comes from the deepest place of human experience, the wisdom that only comes from having lived long enough to see how the story unfolds. If you're ready to learn from people who've already walked the path you're on, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. This kind of wisdom deserves to be shared far and wide. Margaret, age 78.
Stop waiting for permission.
Margaret sits in her sunlit kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that's gone cold while she talks. At 78, she radiates a confidence that seems to come from deep within.
I spent the first 40 years of my life waiting for my husband to approve of my dreams. Waiting for my children to be old enough. Waiting for the right time to start my own business, to travel, to pursue my art. I was always waiting for someone else to give me permission to live my own life.
Margaret's story took a dramatic turn at 45 when her husband left her for a younger woman.
I was devastated, but it was also the wake-up call I needed. I realized that no one was going to hand me the life I wanted. I had to take it.
She started a small catering business from her kitchen, something she'd dreamed about for years but never pursued because her husband thought it was impractical. The business grew, and by 50, Margaret owned 3 restaurants. She traveled to Italy to study cooking, learned to paint watercolors, and even took flying lessons at 60.
The biggest lie we tell ourselves is that we need permission to pursue our dreams, your spouse's approval, your family's blessing, society's acceptance. None of that matters as much as your own inner voice telling you what would make you come alive.
Research from Stanford University supports Margaret's insight. Their longitudinal study of life satisfaction found that people who pursued personally meaningful goals, regardless of external validation, reported significantly higher happiness levels in their later years. Margaret's advice to her younger self:
stop asking what will people think, and start asking what will I regret not trying. The approval you're seeking from others is never as important as the approval you need from yourself.
Robert, age 85.
Your health is your wealth.
Robert greets me at his door with a firm handshake and a smile that lights up his entire face. At 85, he moves with the vitality of someone 20 years younger. But it wasn't always this way.
At 35, I thought I was invincible. I worked 80-hour weeks, lived on fast food and coffee, and considered sleep a luxury I couldn't afford. I smoked 2 packs a day, and my idea of exercise was walking from my car to the office.
The wake-up call came at 42 when Robert had his first heart attack.
Lying in that hospital bed, I realized I'd been trading my future for my present. I'd been stealing from my old self to pay for my young self's ambitions.
Robert made radical changes. He quit smoking, started walking daily, learned to cook healthy meals, and prioritized sleep like it was a business meeting he couldn't miss.
It wasn't easy, but every day I invested in my health, I was investing in my future self.
The payoff is evident. While many of Robert's peers struggle with multiple health conditions, Robert still hikes, travels, and has the energy to play with his great-grandchildren.
My friends always ask me how I stay so healthy. The answer is simple. I started treating my body like it was the only one I'd ever get.
Dr. Lisa Chen, a geriatrician at Johns Hopkins, confirms Robert's approach. The health choices you make in your 30s, 40s, and 50s determine your quality of life in your 70s, 80s, and beyond. It's never too late to start, but the earlier you begin, the more dramatic the benefits. Robert's advice to his younger self.
Your body keeps score of everything you do to it. Every cigarette, every skipped meal, every all-nighter, every day without movement, it all adds up. Invest in your health like you invest in your retirement, because without your health, retirement is meaningless.
Dorothy, age 89.
Love is a choice, not just a feeling.
Dorothy has been married to her husband Frank for 67 years. When I ask her secret, she laughs, a sound full of warmth and wisdom.
Young people today think love is supposed to be easy. They think if you have to work at it, it must not be true love. What nonsense.
Dorothy and Frank met when she was 18 and he was 20.
We were head over heels in love, sure, but that feeling doesn't last forever. What lasts is the choice to keep loving even when you don't feel like it.
Their marriage has weathered job losses, the death of a child, financial struggles, and health scares.
There were times we didn't like each other very much, times when I thought about leaving, times when I'm sure he did too. But we'd made a commitment, not just to love each other when it felt good, but to choose love even when it felt hard.
Dorothy describes love as a daily decision.
Every morning, I choose to see Frank's good qualities instead of focusing on the things that annoy me. I choose to speak kindly instead of sarcastically. I choose to forgive quickly instead of holding grudges. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a practice.
Research from the University of Virginia supports Dorothy's wisdom. Their study of long-term marriages found that couples who viewed love as a choice and commitment, rather than just an emotion, had significantly higher relationship satisfaction and lower divorce rates. Dorothy's advice to her younger self.
Stop looking for someone who makes you happy all the time. Look for someone you can choose to love every day, especially on the days when they drive you crazy. That's what real love looks like.
James, age 81.
Your children need your presence, not your presence.
James sits in his study, surrounded by photos of children and grandchildren. His eyes fill with tears as he talks about his biggest regret.
I thought being a good father meant providing for my family. I worked constantly, traveled for business, missed school plays and baseball games, but I told myself it was all for them. I was building a future, securing their college funds, making sure they had everything they needed.
James pauses, looking at a photo of his young son.
What they needed was me. Not my money, not the big house, not the expensive vacations. They needed their dad to be present.
The realization came too late.
By the time I understood what I'd missed, my kids were adults with their own lives. I'd provided for them financially, but I'd failed them emotionally. It took years to rebuild those relationships, and some damage can never be fully undone.
Now, with his grandchildren, James does things differently.
I turn off my phone when I'm with them. I get down on the floor and play their games. I listen to their stories, even when they seem trivial to me. I've learned that love is spelled Time.
Dr. Ellen Galinsky's research at the Families and Work Institute revealed that when asked what they would change about their parents' schedules, children didn't ask for more time. They asked for their parents to be less stressed and more focused when they were together. James's advice to his younger self.
Your children will remember how you made them feel, not what you bought them. They'll remember if you were really listening when they talked, not how many hours you worked. Success at work means nothing if you fail at home.
Eleanor, age 76.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
Eleanor's living room is modest but warm, filled with handmade quilts and family photos. She radiates contentment despite what might seem like a simple life.
I spent decades being miserable because I was always looking at what other people had: my neighbor's bigger house, my sister's successful husband, my friend's well-behaved children, my colleague's perfect figure. I was so busy envying other people's lives that I forgot to live my own.
Eleanor describes a pivotal moment at 50 when she attended her high school reunion.
I spent weeks beforehand worrying about what to wear, how I looked, what people would think of my life. I was so anxious about measuring up.
At the reunion, Eleanor discovered something surprising.
The woman I'd always envied for her perfect marriage was getting divorced. The man who seemed so successful was battling depression. The couple with the beautiful house was deep in debt. Everyone's life looked perfect from the outside, but everyone was struggling with something. That night, I realized I'd been competing in a race that didn't exist, trying to win a game where the rules kept changing and the finish line kept moving.
Eleanor made a conscious decision to stop comparing and start appreciating.
I started focusing on my own blessings instead of other people's advantages. My health, my loving family, my small but cozy home, my simple but meaningful work. When I stopped looking sideways at other people's lives, I finally started enjoying my own.
Research from the University of California, Berkeley, confirms Eleanor's insight. Their studies show that people who frequently engage in social comparison report lower levels of life satisfaction and higher rates of depression and anxiety. Eleanor's advice to her younger self.
Your only competition is the person you were yesterday. Stop measuring your behind-the-scenes reality against other people's highlight reels. The grass isn't greener on the other side, it's greener where you water it.
Thomas, age 73.
Take the risks while you can.
Thomas sits on his porch overlooking a small vineyard he planted 5 years ago. At 73, he's finally living his dream, but he wishes he'd started sooner.
I always played it safe, safe job, safe investments, safe choices. I told myself I was being responsible, but really, I was being afraid. I was so worried about security that I forgot to live.
Thomas worked for the same company for 40 years, dreaming of someday owning a vineyard but never acting on it.
I had 1,000 excuses: too risky, too expensive, too late to start over, what if it failed? I let fear disguise itself as prudence.
The turning point came when his best friend died suddenly at 65.
He'd been planning to travel the world when he retired. He had itineraries, savings, all these dreams. But he never got the chance. That's why I realized that the biggest risk isn't failure, it's dying with your dreams still inside you.
At 68, Thomas took early retirement and bought a small piece of land.
Everyone thought I'd lost my mind. You're too old to start a vineyard, they said. What if you fail? But I realized I'd rather fail at something I love than succeed at something that made me miserable.
5 years later, Thomas's vineyard is thriving.
I'm not going to get rich, but I wake up every morning excited about my day. I wish I'd taken this risk 20 years ago.
Thomas's advice to his younger self.
The safe path isn't actually safe. It's the riskiest path of all because it guarantees you'll never know what you're capable of. Take calculated risks while you're young enough to recover from failure and old enough to know what matters.
This is a perfect time to hit that like button if these insights are resonating with you. And please subscribe to our channel. Wisdom like this deserves to be shared with as many people as possible. Grace, age 84.
Forgiveness is for you, not them.
Grace's voice is soft but strong as she shares one of the most difficult lessons of her life. At 84, she carries herself with a peace that seems to come from deep inner work.
I held on to anger for 15 years. My business partner cheated me out of my share of our company. He used our friendship to manipulate me, forged documents, and left me nearly bankrupt. I was consumed with rage.
Grace describes how the anger poisoned everything.
I couldn't enjoy anything because I was always thinking about what he'd done to me. I'd lie awake at night planning revenge, imagining confrontations, replaying the betrayal over and over. The anger was eating me alive.
The transformation came when Grace's doctor told her that her chronic stress was affecting her health.
He said the anger was literally killing me. My blood pressure was dangerously high, I wasn't sleeping, and I was developing ulcers.
Grace began seeing a therapist who helped her understand forgiveness differently.
I thought forgiveness meant saying what he did was okay, or that I had to trust him again. But forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself from carrying their poison. Forgiving him didn't mean he was right or that I was weak. It meant I was choosing to stop letting his actions control my life. I was taking my power back.
Research from Stanford University's Forgiveness Project shows that people who learn to forgive report lower levels of stress, better sleep, reduced anxiety, and improved relationships. Grace's advice to her younger self. Henry, age 79.
Money can't buy happiness, but poverty can steal it.
Henry's perspective on money is refreshingly honest. Having experienced both wealth and financial struggle, he's learned nuanced lessons about money's role in happiness.
I grew up poor, really poor. We sometimes didn't have enough food, couldn't afford winter coats, lived in constant stress about money. People who say money doesn't matter have never been truly broke.
Henry worked his way through college, started a small business, and eventually became quite wealthy.
For the first time in my life, I could sleep at night without worrying about bills. I could help my parents send my kids to college, take my wife on the trips she'd always dreamed about. Money didn't make me happy, but it removed the obstacles to happiness.
But Henry also learned money's limitations.
After a certain point, more money doesn't make you happier. I kept chasing bigger numbers, thinking the next promotion or business deal would finally satisfy me. But it never did.
Henry's perspective changed when he had a heart attack at 55.
Lying in that hospital bed, I realized I'd been so busy making money that I'd forgotten to make a life. I had everything I thought I wanted, but I was miserable. I found balance by focusing on enough. I figured out how much money I needed to live comfortably and feel secure. Then I stopped chasing more just for the sake of more. I started focusing on experiences instead of possessions, relationships instead of achievements.
Research from Princeton University found that happiness increases with income up to about $75,000 annually, adjusted for inflation, after which additional income has diminishing returns on well-being. Henry's advice to his younger self.
Don't let anyone tell you money doesn't matter. Poverty is stressful and limiting. But don't make the mistake of thinking more money will solve all your problems. Figure out enough and then focus on the things money can't buy.
Ruth, age 87.
Your parents are people too.
Ruth's relationship with her parents was complicated, and she carries regret about not understanding them better while they were alive.
I spent my 20s and 30s angry at my parents. I thought they were too strict, too old-fashioned, too worried about everything. I rolled my eyes at their stories, dismissed their concerns, and was generally impatient with them.
Ruth's perspective began changing when she became a parent herself.
Suddenly, I understood the fear that keeps you awake at night when your child is out past curfew. I understood the worry that makes you ask a million questions. I understood why they seemed so overprotective.
But the real revelation came when Ruth was helping her mother clean out old boxes.
I found letters my parents had written to each other during the war, photos from before I was born, documents about struggles I never knew they'd faced. I realized they had entire lives, dreams, fears, and experiences that had nothing to do with being my parents.
Ruth learned that her father had wanted to be a musician but gave up his dreams to support his family. Her mother had been valedictorian of her high school class but never got to go to college because of the Depression.
They weren't just mom and dad, they were complex people with their own stories of sacrifice, disappointment, and unfulfilled dreams.
Ruth's advice to her younger self.
Ask your parents about their lives before you existed. Ask about their dreams, their fears, their biggest regrets and greatest joys. They won't be around forever, and someday you'll desperately wish you could have one more conversation with them.
Charles, age 92.
Your body will teach you everything you need to know.
At 92, Charles is the oldest person I interviewed, and his perspective on the relationship between mind and body is profound.
I spent the first 60 years of my life ignoring my body. I treated it like a machine that should just work without maintenance. I ignored fatigue, pushed through pain, and numbed discomfort with alcohol, caffeine, or just willpower.
Charles's body began talking to him more insistently in his 60s.
I started having back pain, digestive issues, sleep problems. Instead of listening to what my body was trying to tell me, I just took pills to make the symptoms go away.
The turning point came when Charles developed severe anxiety in his late 60s.
The doctor wanted to prescribe medication, but I decided to try to understand what was happening instead of just medicating it away.
Charles discovered that his anxiety was his body's way of telling him he was living in a way that wasn't sustainable.
I was holding tension in my shoulders, shallow breathing from stress, eating foods that made me feel worse. My body was trying to protect me, but I hadn't been listening.
Charles learned meditation, yoga, and what he calls body awareness.
I started paying attention to how different foods made me feel, how my posture affected my mood, how my breathing changed when I was stressed. My body became my teacher instead of my enemy.
Charles's advice to his younger self.
Your body is constantly giving you information about what you need. Pain, fatigue, tension, digestive issues, These aren't just inconveniences to be medicated away. They're your body's way of communicating. Learn to listen before it has to shout.
Alice, age 82.
Travel while you can walk.
Alice sits surrounded by photo albums from her travels around the world. Her eyes sparkle as she talks about adventures that span 6 decades.
People always say they'll travel someday. Someday when they have more money. Someday when they have more time. Someday when the kids are older. Someday when they retire. Someday never comes.
Alice started traveling young, despite having little money.
I stayed in hostels, ate street food, took buses instead of planes. I thought I was making sacrifices, but those turned out to be the most authentic experiences I ever had.
Alice continued traveling throughout her life, adapting her style as her circumstances changed.
When I had young children, we took camping trips. When I was working full-time, I took long weekends to nearby places. When I had more money, I took more comfortable trips. The point was to keep exploring.
Now, at 82, Alice's traveling days are mostly behind her due to mobility issues.
I'm grateful for every trip I took, every adventure I had. But I also regret the trips I didn't take because I was waiting for the perfect time.
Alice's advice is practical.
Don't wait for the perfect time, the perfect budget, or the perfect circumstances. Travel while your knees can carry you up mountains, while you can sleep in uncomfortable beds, while you have the energy to explore. The world is too beautiful to see only in pictures.
Alice's advice to her younger self.
The best time to travel is now. Not next year, not when you have more money, not when life is less complicated. Now. Because someday I might never come, and you can't explore the world from a wheelchair.
William, age 86. Learn to say no. William spent most of his life saying yes to everything and everyone, a pattern that nearly destroyed his health and happiness. I was a people pleaser. I said yes to every request, every invitation, every opportunity. I thought being helpful and accommodating made me a good person, but it made me an exhausted person. William's calendar was always full. Work commitments, social obligations, volunteer work, family events. I was busy all the time but never felt like I was actually living. I was just reacting to other people's priorities instead of pursuing my own. The breaking point came when William realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd done something just because he wanted to do it. Everything in my life was driven by obligation, guilt, or the need to please others. I'd lost myself in the process of trying to make everyone else happy. Learning to say no was difficult for William. I felt guilty at first. I worried people would think I was selfish or lazy. But gradually, I realized that saying no to things that didn't matter allowed me to say yes to things that did. William learned to evaluate requests based on his own values and priorities. I ask myself, does this align with what's important to me? Will I regret saying no more than I'll regret saying yes? Am I saying yes out of genuine interest or just obligation? William's advice to his younger self. No is a complete sentence. You don't have to justify every boundary you set or apologize for having priorities. Saying no to good things allows you to say yes to great things. Betty, age 75.
Stop trying to control everything.
Betty laughs as she describes her younger self as a control freak who tried to micromanage every aspect of life.
I had 5-year plans, backup plans for my backup plans, and contingencies for everything. I thought if I could just plan well enough, work hard enough, and anticipate every problem, I could control the outcome of everything.
Life had other plans. Betty's husband was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's at 58, turning their carefully planned retirement dreams upside down.
All my planning, all my control, all my preparation, none of it mattered. Life threw us a curveball that wasn't in any of my plans.
Initially, Betty fought against the new reality.
I researched treatments, tried to maintain our old routines, and exhausted myself trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. I was trying to control the uncontrollable.
The shift came when Betty learned to distinguish between what she could and couldn't control.
I couldn't control my husband's disease, but I could control how I responded to it. I couldn't change our situation, but I could choose to find joy in small moments.
Betty found peace in focusing on the present moment rather than trying to control the future.
Instead of mourning the retirement we'd planned, I started appreciating the time we had. Instead of fighting his condition, I learned to connect with him where he was.
Betty's advice to her younger self.
Control is largely an illusion. You can influence outcomes through your choices and actions, but you can't control everything that happens to you. Focus your energy on what you can actually change, and learn to accept what you can't.
Edward, age 88.
Invest in experiences, not things.
Edward's home is comfortable but not cluttered with possessions. Instead, his walls are covered with photos from a lifetime of experiences.
I spent my 40s and 50s accumulating stuff, Edward reflects. Bigger house, nicer car, latest gadgets, expensive clothes. I thought these things would make me happy, or at least make me look successful.
Edward's perspective changed when his house was burglarized.
They took my expensive watch, my camera equipment, my wife's jewelry. I was devastated, not just by the loss, but by how much my happiness had been tied to these objects.
That experience prompted Edward to reassess his priorities.
I realized that my happiest memories weren't about things I owned. They were about experiences I'd had. The camping trip with my kids, the anniversary dinner with my wife, the weekend fishing with my brother.
Edward and his wife began investing in experiences instead of possessions.
We traveled more, took classes together, spent money on concerts and plays instead of furniture and gadgets. We created memories instead of accumulating stuff.
Research from Cornell University supports Edward's insight. Their studies show that experiential purchases provide more lasting happiness than material purchases because experiences become part of our identity in ways that possessions cannot. Edward's advice to his younger self.
20 years from now, you won't remember what car you drove or what clothes you wore, but you'll remember the people you were with and the experiences you shared. Invest in making memories, not collecting things.
Conclusion: the wisdom of years. As I sit here reflecting on these 15 conversations, I'm struck by the common threads that run through all their stories. Despite their different backgrounds, circumstances, and life paths, these wise elders share remarkably similar insights about what truly matters. They all learned, sometimes painfully, that happiness isn't found in the places our culture tells us to look. It's not in achievement or accumulation, in perfection or control, in other people's approval or in comparison with others. Instead, it's found in connection, presence, authenticity, health, gratitude, and the courage to live according to your own values. Their regrets aren't about the risks they took. They're about the risks they didn't take, the words they didn't say, the relationships they didn't prioritize, and the time they wasted waiting for someday. But perhaps most importantly, their stories remind us that it's never too late to change course. Margaret didn't start her business until 45. Thomas didn't plant his vineyard until 68. Grace didn't find peace until she learned to forgive at 69. Charles didn't develop body awareness until his 70s. The wisdom they've shared isn't just interesting, it's actionable. You don't have to wait until you're 80 to benefit from these insights. You can start applying them today, right now, in whatever decade of life you're currently living. Stop waiting for permission to pursue your dreams. Invest in your health like your future depends on it, because it does. Choose love daily, especially when it's difficult. Be present with your children. Stop comparing yourself to others. Take calculated risks while you can recover from failure. Forgive for your own sake. Find your enough with money. See your parents as complete human beings. Listen to your body's wisdom. Travel while you can walk. Learn to say no. Accept what you can't control. And invest in experiences that become treasured memories. If these 15 voices of wisdom have touched your heart or changed your perspective, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. This is exactly the kind of content we're passionate about creating. Real wisdom from real people who've walked the entire path of life and can show us the way. The beauty of wisdom is that it's never too late to gain it, and it's never too early to apply it. These 15 remarkable people have given us a roadmap for living with fewer regrets and more joy. The question isn't whether their advice is valuable, it clearly is. The question is whether we'll have the courage to take it. Your future self is counting on the choices you make today. Make them wisely, with the benefit of those who've already walked the path you're traveling. Until next time, take care of yourself and those you love.